Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I am Drake Behrakis, Chairman of the National Hellenic Society, and I want to welcome you to another great feature we're offering via technology on webinar, on Zoom, as well as Facebook. And it's a pleasure for us to once again collaborate with the National Hellenic Museum with their Oral Archive History Project. And this evening we've got two wonderful couples, two great Philhellenes that will share their personal stories about their lives and their work. Many of you in our audience know of them personally, as well as through some of the collaboration we've done with them through the National Hellenic Society. But let me kick things off first with our first couple. I also want to thank, before that, thank my co-moderator, George Orfanakos, Executive Director of the American School of Classical Studies in Athens. And George will be co-moderating with me, and we'll coordinate the program together. So George, welcome. Let's start with Elizabeth and John. Obviously both professors at Randolph Macon College. John is the Stavros Niarchos Foundation named professorship, and Elizabeth is a Shelton H. Short, the third professor in liberal arts, professor of classical studies. Both obviously heavily involved in education and in the field. Elizabeth has worked obviously in Greece, but in numerous locations, including Italy and Ethiopia. And more relevant to our audience is her work in Pylos, some of the newer, more modern finds that have been discovered there. And of course, Dr. Camp's been working in Athens for, I won't say too long, but 1966, working in the Athenian Agora for first as an excavator and all the way through today as the excavations director and the leader of the excavation there in Athens. And he has obviously, as well as been out in the field, has taught and lectured hundreds and hundreds of wonderful young students, but also rising archaeologists, and is a contemporary today, has a lot of respect in the field, and obviously a fan favorite and very close friend of NHS through his collaborations with the National Geographic's Greek Guide to Greece, as well as appearing as a regular contributor not only at NHS programs and events, but also a number of documentary films about Greece and democracy. So Elizabeth and John, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. George?
Yeah, and it's my pleasure. It's great to be with you, Drake, and I want to offer a warm greeting to all of our friends from the National Hellenic Society and those who are watching this program. It is my pleasure to introduce, in addition to John and Beth now, two other scholars, a classic couple from Bucknell University with deep ties to the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. And I'm speaking, of course, of Stephanie Larson and Kevin Daly. So Stephanie is a professor of classics and ancient Mediterranean studies. She is a Greek cultural historian and philologist with special interests in the construction and maintenance of regional, ethnic, and gender identities in archaic and classical Greece. She also serves as secretary of the American Schools Managing Committee. Stephanie, what I found interesting, actually grew up in San Diego and Minnesota. Kevin is an associate professor of classics and ancient Mediterranean studies at Bucknell, and he is the chair of the Department of Classics and Ancient Mediterranean Studies. Now, Kevin served as the Mellon Professor at the American School of Classical Studies, and in that role, that's where I first met them, they moved and lived in Greece for a couple of years together with their two children, Maggie, who is now 16, and Sean, who is 13. And we'll hopefully talk a little bit about them later on. Kevin grew up in San Diego, and an important attribute or important thing that they've been a part of is Stephanie and Kevin are also co-directors of the excavations on the Ismenion Hill, a synagogia in Thebes, Greece. So with that introduction, I'll send it back to Drake so we can get our questions in here from our panelists.
Sure, sure. And we're going to make this obviously as personal and interactive as possible, but really flexible and you know, really allow you to go deep into your hearts and souls and tell us about your life's work and what's been great about it, the challenges, the frustrations. But really, I think the first session here we want to kick off is getting some background information from all of you. So let's start with Elizabeth and Stephanie first, and then we'll go back to Kevin and John. is, what was the impetus for you growing up, or what was, maybe it was a series of events, or maybe it was something that charmed you, that decided that you were really wanted to focus and study on the classics, and obviously eventually the Greek classics. So when we start with Stephanie first, and then with Elizabeth, you can jump in.
Okay, well, this is actually kind of a funny story. I was in college. I had originally started as a music major, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, I'm taking Latin," and I was pretty good at it. She said, "You should take Greek," and all my professors were telling me I should take Greek, and I thought, well, how relevant is that? I don't see the future in that. So I had this big fight with my roommate at the time, and she said, "No, I know I'm taking Greek as linguistics major. You're going to love it. I give you 2 weeks, and you're going to love it." So I just said on a dare, fine, just to get her off my back, I'll take Greek, fine. So I took it, and 2 weeks later, she was absolutely right. I sort of fell in love with it, and then I volunteered for an excavation in Crete the next summer, and then it was over. I just fell in love with everything. That's what happened. Yeah.
Elizabeth?
My childhood friend is a woman named Vespina, and Vespina had to go to Greek school every day after, well, not every day, but several days a week after school. And she really hated it. And she was having a big fight with her mother about going to Greek school. And so I looked at the book and I said, "Oh, that's really cool. I'd love to go." And her mother, Maria, looked at me and said, "Kanana problema, kapa." And so I started going to Greek school with Denise. And that's what really got me connected to the Greek world, is going to Greek school at the church in Columbus, Ohio.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. Kevin?
Well, like many people, what really grabbed me was a good teacher. I had a teacher in the 7th grade who really focused on Greece and Rome and would talk about her visits to Greece especially. And so that was always in the back of my mind. My parents are immigrants to this country. They both came from Ireland, and my grandfather had been a local school teacher, and he was called in whenever they pulled something out of the bog fields to report it to the National Museum. So I grew up with stories of my grandfather being called in to identify what had just come out of the ground. So those two ideas went together, and when I went to college, my family had decided that I was going to be a medical doctor, and on the side I kept taking classics, and eventually I just had to admit this is where my true love lies. So I pursued it from then on out.
Thank you, Kevin. John?
I had 2 influences early on. In the 4th grade, I was taught about Greece at Shady Hill School in Cambridge, where I was brought up, by Miss Elliott. And she basically corrupted dozens of students on the East Coast. My older sister also became an archaeologist. My younger sister left the school before she got to Miss Elliott, and she became something else. She had 5 children and she got very busy. She did not become an archaeologist. At the same time, this is when I was 10 years old, a war buddy of my father's, and they had driven ambulances across North Africa with the British 8th Army, was teaching in a nearby school, teaching Latin. And he used to come have dinner with us every Wednesday night. And he would bring with him coins from Rome. He worked in the academy in Rome as a librarian. And those two together made it absolutely certain from the age of 10 that there was nowhere else to go.
Thank you. George?
Thank you. Yeah, well, let me just say, first of all, in response to what Beth said in her calling, that as a Greek American who grew up going to Greek school, it's actually the first time I ever met someone who voluntarily went to Greek school.
Exactly.
So we're very impressed with that. Now, as I thought about tonight's webinar and have the chance to sit down with the 4 of you, which I've come to know and love, I started thinking about, actually, there are other classic couples out there. You're not the only ones. And I've met several since joining the American School, and I'm sure I'm not going to capture all of them. But as I started to write a list, I was thinking of Jack Davis and Sherry Stalker, Mark Lawal, Leah Sterling, John Papadopoulos, Sarah Morris, Diana and Fred Kleiner, Diane and Fred Klein, and then I stopped. And I said, there's probably a bunch more. So my questions are, first of all, how did you meet each other? And more importantly, why do you think there are so many classic couples? John, do you want to go first? And then
Sure. I'm going to answer the second question first because I've watched it happen quite a few times. And that is on Friday afternoon, when you come out of the trench in 100-degree heat, you're kind of a little smelly, you're very dirty, you're grumpy, and you're really, really tired. And if you look good to anybody else and they look good to you, you know everything you need to know. You might as well take a trip, because traveling is the other stressful point, but you really can pick a mate very, very easily, because you're seeing them at their absolute worst in every respect. And in the Agora, I counted them. In our excavations, we've produced so far 18 couples.
Wow, terrific. Why don't we go, Stephanie?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. The other part is that, the other part maybe is that we all share a passion for this material and this kind of way of thinking and this way of life. And I could never think about sharing my life with anybody that didn't also share that passion. It's kind of a 24/7 thing. When you're working in the field or when you have a big project, I mean, it's really important to have someone at your side who can be your confidant and also your editor, and also just, you know, your better half. And when we work together, we also have different skills that we bring to things. So I think that's part of it, just sharing the passion for antiquity.
Right. And Kev, how did you meet?
Well, we met in Greece, which everybody thinks of as sunshine and beaches and beautiful settings, and that is certainly true. But Stephanie and I met in the computer room of the American School. And
Pretty dull.
Surprising anything exciting comes out of there. But in fact, we had some good friends who knew each of us separately and sort of predicted that we would get along, and sure enough, we did.
Oh, terrific. And Beth, how did you and John meet?
The American School. The American School is everything. It's an oasis. It's a place where people with this shared interests come together. And it's like, I don't know, it's a different space, a different place to go. I mean, the American School is really, really special. And I'm not trying to just sell it, but I mean, it really is, because such a privilege to get to go there and spend some years. So that was, of course, where to meet.
Oh, great, great. So I think Drake's going to take you now into your work.
Yeah, and then specifically with regards to your work, the element of, you know, you've worked together as husband and wife. You know, some of the more, I guess, more memorable moments, highlights, and if you want to share some lowlights as well, feel free. But give us a sense of, you know, working with your spouse and some of the memorable moments that have happened together. So why don't we do Elizabeth first with John?
Well, we haven't worked, I mean, once we put together a metal shelf, but we don't, we didn't kill each other. We don't actually, I have never dug a day in the Agora. We did write a book together and we didn't kill each other over that. But you see, the Agora for me, I'm Bronze Age, so that's the day before yesterday. So I really like to work in the earlier periods of time. And so I've never worked a day in the Agora with John, not a single day. Yeah, so I have my own, I pursue my own excavations and my own research, and he really helps. I did drag him off to Ethiopia with me to work on the connections of Greece and Ethiopia. So he has managed to go there twice. And so did Kevin, actually.
And I guess, oh, I'm sorry. I can say that strangely enough, this is a perfect mix, because Beth has worked with us at Thebes. And I have worked with John at the Agora. So we can answer a different kind of couples question in that way. Again, we all share the same interests. But I would say in working with Stephanie at Thebes, what she said, the skill set being different is a very useful thing. When I reach the limit of my patience, I am smart enough to walk away and let Stephanie handle it in certain situations, and she does the same for me. On any given day, Stephanie's Greek can be better than mine, or mine can be better than hers. And we will talk to each other about having a good Greek day or a bad Greek day. So if we have to interact with our workers or with the local ephoria, we know who's on for the day. And I would say one of the best things about working in a small town like Thebes is I would run around and do a lot of the errands in the middle of the excavation, trying to put out sort of equipment fires that needed tending to. So if we needed more buckets or we needed some tools, I'd run around. And I kept hearing in town about this lovely American woman that everybody seemed to know. And sure enough, it was Stephanie. I was just sort of the gopher, but everybody in town knew Stephanie, and I think she could be elected mayor.
I definitely got that sense when I met both of you in Greece too, and seeing you and interacting with the locals.
I want to say something about this too. I have dug on the same site as Beth, but just not at the same time. She dug at Pylos a couple of years ago. I dug there in 1969 with Carl Blagan. I dug for 3 weeks. I put my trench down about 25 meters from the warrior grave, missing it completely 30 years before it came out. Beth stepped on the site and found a Tholos tomb pretty much her first week of digging. You're a Bronze Age person. There are about 150 Tholos tombs in the world for everybody to share. And Beth, as a Bronze Age archaeologist, got to find one. So we do have a connection through Pylos, although not synchronous.
So actually that leads us into our a little bit, because some of the people listening may not know a little bit about the various sites that we're talking about. So if you don't mind, can we talk a little bit about Thebes? We'll start there, and what's significant about it and what you've been working on. Agora, Corinth, you mentioned Ethiopia. Just a couple of insights into why these are significant sites. Okay, and Pylos for that matter, if you want to talk about that. Kevin, and we'll start there.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about Thebes and the sites.
Okay.
Sure. Thebes as a site has a huge history. It's most well known to some from their Bronze Age presence. It's also known in mythology as the home to Oedipus, and mythologically it's where Hercules was born, and it's also where the god Dionysus was born. Stephanie and I were lucky enough to work on a site called the Ismenion Hill, where there's a temple of Apollo Ismenios. There's not much left of it. It was uncovered in the early part of the last century, but there were reports of an extensive cemetery of what was labeled as Byzantine date. It was a little bit unclear, so we went back to see if we could find the limits of the sanctuary and investigate the cemetery a bit more. And one of the things we found was a multi-layer site, a multi-period site. There is, in fact, there are bits of the temple still to be found. We found a couple of those. But we also found a quite extensive cemetery. And Stephanie can tell you a little bit about what was in that cemetery.
Yeah, so it's going to be very important. We're working on the first volume of our final publications now. In the cemetery, we think we have a hospice situation, probably a leprosarium that's associated with the Church of the Evangelist Luke, which is right across the street. And so we have a pilgrimage site that's associated with a bunch of very ill people, and we've got lots of data collection going on right now. We have some samples sent off to the Max Planck Institute in Germany and some to Canada for DNA analysis and some other kinds of analyses. And so we're finding a lot of medical humanities and health history going on here. And this may be the first leprosarium that's ever going to be published from the Eastern Mediterranean, which is pretty fascinating. So we're kind of democratizing, if you will, excuse me, John, democratizing a little bit of archaeology instead of, we're adding to the royal tombs that people find in the amazing buildings that people talk about. We're adding a slice of real life also from the 5th century CE to about the 6th century CE. So it's pretty exciting stuff, although it's not as, I don't know, it's a little bit morbid.
No. And that's a great segue for John to talk about the Agora.
The Agora is basically downtown ancient Athens, and it covers, about 4,000, 5,000 years of history. So one of the first things you learn right away is that you have to be a jack of all trades. You may think you have a specialty, but you have to love whatever layer you're digging in that year. When we get to dig what we want, we're digging the public buildings of ancient Athens, the buildings used to run and administer the world's first democracy, so that we have the Senate House, we have the Chief Magistrate's Office, we have the law courts, we have the Mint, we have the Bureau of Standards, we have the archive building. So in addition to all the written information we have about ancient Athens, we can supplement it by the buildings where these events actually took place, and by additional inscriptions that give us primary historical sources to tell us more than we can learn just from the literature.
Wonderful. And Beth, could you talk about Pylos and especially Ethiopia, what you were looking for there and what you're doing and other things?
Pylos was very exciting. We had a pile of currant bushes that were brush on top of they were all brown and crunchy and a real mess and full of snakes and toads and modern trash. And as we pulled it away, there were 3 very peculiar stones all mixed up. And we thought maybe the farmer had been, messing around in there and moving the stones, because the stones must have been in his way, but also he might have been digging a little bit to look for things. At any rate, there's no way he could have found this, because we were 4 meters, basically 4 meters above the floor of a Tholos tomb. And I kept tapping on the rocks and I would hear hollow noises. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, this is hollow, I'm going to fall in.
Oh.
I was right over the lintel block. And when we started to pull it away, we found the entranceway, the long dromos that has stone walls on either side that enters into the tomb. We were about halfway down. One day we were down in there working when there was an earthquake. And all of the workmen were like, Seasonal, and they were crouching and getting all upset and everything. And you could feel the tomb moving. It was unbelievably weird. So I think being in an earthquake in a Mycenaean Tholos tomb at Pylos was probably a highlight of my digging career there.
Wow.
I don't know if they've finished. They've been working on it steadily ever since. And I had to come back and teach, but you can't stop. It's gigantic. You can't stop when you're digging a Tholos. So I think it's still going on. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Yeah, I know. That's terrific. Drake?
As well as being excavators and working out in the field, you're also doing some work in the classroom as well. Just in general, what would you, and maybe through your experiences, what are some of the biggest or greatest challenges you face, or potentially students that are coming up through the ranks? What are the biggest challenges that are out there today for classical archaeologists?
I'm sure I would like to talk about diversity. Honestly, we don't have a diverse population working in our field. And as I've been working in the field of, if I've been working in cross-cultural context with Ethiopia, in line 22 of the Odyssey, Poseidon has gone to visit the Ethiopians, and I wanted to know why. And so it was Homer that sent me there, and it's really remarkable, and there are a lot of connections. But to get Ethiopians interested in Greece, or Greek archaeologists interested in Ethiopia, or American people of color interested in either of these is very challenging. But I think if we just look at the texts and look at the opportunities for understanding how diverse Greece was and how much Greece was a hub for transport and trade in the entire ancient world, we could really draw in a lot of people of diverse ancestry from Africa, from parts of Asia, and from the Middle East. And that would be the challenge I would like to see us go for a little bit, broaden our horizons and make sure everybody out there knows how much the ancient Greeks were connected with the rest of the world.
I'm gonna pause for a moment because we're getting some comments that I'm reading, and one of the things, people don't kind of have a sense of what the American school is. So I'll just take 30 seconds and then I'm going to come back to you. So for those of you that are joining us that aren't aware, the American School of Classical Studies at Athens was established and founded in 1881. It's headquartered now, the main campus is in Kolonaki in Greece. And we have 2 main excavation sites, ancient Corinth and the Athenian Agora, which John Camp is the director of. You have you have the Inavius Library, the Blegen Library, you have the Wiener Laboratory for Archaeological Sciences. You also have affiliated sites. I mentioned the managing committee before. Those are the academic members. Basically, Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Hellenic scholars across, the entire country. I think numbers, it's about 190 member institutions, universities and colleges and so forth, and about 400 or so members of the managing committee. that basically oversee the academic excellence of the school and make academic appointments and are very involved in every aspect of the institution. The school has developed over time and grown, and now it's ironic, it's not just classical studies, but throughout, post-antique, from prehistoric Greece to post-antique Greece, and it covers the large gamut. I'm going to stop for a moment there. We just want to take a look for a moment. As students, you've been members of the school. You've been, through yearly programs. Most, I believe, all of you. What other sites have you worked on? That was a question we had. So, example, who's been in Corinth? Can anyone talk about that? Any other affiliated sites of the American School?
I guess I'll just pitch in and say that one of my first experiences as an archaeologist was a student volunteer, like I said, in Crete, and that was Moklos excavations. I went back there for 2 years and loved it, and that's what caused me really to fall in love with antiquity. There's nothing better than sitting on the roof of a building and cleaning out conical cups that are completely whole and almost untouched from antiquity. And so that was one affiliated excavation that I worked on. And then I also worked through the school at Corinth, and Kevin also worked at Corinth.
Right, as a student at the American School, folks will go as graduate students, and this is part of their professional training. It's a mixture of folks who focus on the literature and folks who focus on the archaeology. And it's sort of a great melting pot of ideas, and it's life-altering. One of the things that you get to do is to put your hands in the soil in Corinth. And so if you've never experienced archaeology before, you can dig in Corinth. When I was there, Charles Williams was the director, and I had never excavated before, and Charles Williams was an engaged and exciting teacher. And so I got to dig for the first time, and quite frankly, I was hooked. The next summer I came back and started to work in the Athenian Agora with John, and I worked there for 15 years. And then Stephanie and I headed up to Thebes, and we've been there since 2011.
And in turning to John, who also coincidentally was a Mellon professor, I remember Kevin had said one time, if you can visit Greece once, take John Camp. If you can visit twice, take John Camp twice. So
Yeah, I've dug only in Greece, and that includes Corinth, Naxos, Isthmia, Epidaurus, and Pylos, as well as the Agora, where I've dug pretty much every year. But the nicest part of the jobs I've had has been as the Mellon professor, leading graduate students around Greece. And we take them out for 4 or 5 10-day trips. We bring them back for a week to let them do their laundry and get another report ready. And then we take them out again and we walk them and show them everything we can possibly reach in the course of the fall and the winter. And it's like a finishing school. The next time they're going to be in class, they're going to be the teachers. They've studied this stuff for their whole career, and it's our job to make sure they've seen it on the ground. So when they're teaching Herodotus, they can talk about the Battle of Marathon with some authority. When they're talking about Greek poetry, they can say this is where Pindar's home was in Thebes, more or less. And it's the hands-on aspect. And for that, I was also very fortunate. It's the people you meet at the school. I spent time with Kendrick Pritchett, who was a great historian of Greece, and his idea of how you check the validity of a historian, the only way you can tell if he's lying or not is to look at the things he tells you that you can check. And the one thing you can check is the topography. Is there a pass through that mountain? Was there a river in that valley? And if Herodotus gets it right, you can believe him a little more than Arrian, who always got it wrong. And so every year for a month, I would go out with Kendrick Pritchett and we would walk any bit of Greece that we hadn't walked already with the students.
I got to dig a lot. I dug at Komos and Kavousi on Crete, and at Corinth, and at Mitru, which is in the middle of nowhere, East Locris, just near Thermopylae, as well as at Thebes with Kevin and Stephanie. And I dug at Chetamura in Italy, and I've worked in Ethiopia, and now I dig Hanover, Virginia to train my students right here, so Patrick Henry and all that. So I've had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of places to dig. Oh, and I had one more. Michael Cosmopoulos site at Iklena. I excavated there for a couple of years, so I got to find a megaron there. It was really quite fun.
You know, and that actually leads us to the question we were going to talk about before we had these comments came in was, you know, so things are changing and they're evolving. And John has often said, you know, the thing that's changed is the technology. So how, you know, one of the questions, how do we harness technology, or how are you finding ways to engage the next generation effectively? What are you seeing?
So I'll just speak in part about what I see in my own house, and then how I see that play out in my classroom. There's a video game called Assassin's Creed that takes place in ancient Greece. And the folks who put together that video game took the time to visit Greece, took the time to take photographs. And our own Bruce Hartzler, who works at the Agora and works at the American School, has spoken to them. They tried to make it as close to the topography as they could. And so my son, Sean, who lived with us in Greece for three years and learned some Greek and learned a little bit about how Greek culture works, now is an expert on the map of Greece. And when I go into the classroom, one of the things you used to have to do is put up a map and say, I'm going to quiz you on this in 2 weeks, and hearts would sink because for some reason they didn't want to look at a map. Now they all know the map from the word go. So technology is really a way to grab people. One of the things we often say is as educators is meet the students where they are. And I'll just say most of them are on their phones. So if we want to meet them, we have to figure out how to put technology in their hands that speaks about ancient Greece.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a follow-up for everyone. We were thinking of, you know, you probably have had many memorable moments in terms of finds and discoveries, but more so, what's escaped you? What would you love to be able to find or discover based on the work that you're doing right now? And each of you can talk to specifically what you're working on now, maybe something in the past. So, John, why don't you start?
I think probably what a lot of us would like to see is some more of the literature. I would love to see an ancient account of the life of Epaminondas. I would like to see the rest of what Aristotle wrote that we don't have. And we have a chance at getting at some of those things when we find these inscriptions on stone. At the Agora, we have 7,500 inscriptions. So I guess I would say I would like to find something that I don't know exists, but that it survives written on stone that was once displayed in ancient Athens.
Elizabeth?
Linear B. I haven't found my Linear B tablet yet. That's the language of the Mycenaeans and the first Greek that was ever written. And I've just got to keep trying to find a Linear B tablet somewhere. So maybe I'll have that luck in the future.
Stephanie?
Well, at one point in our dig, we found a little tiny hole that was clearly way down in the bedrock that was coming out into a much larger cavern. And we thought at one point that might have been, this was late in the afternoon, it might have been a Mycenaean tomb, and we were getting all excited. And I thought, oh my gosh, this could be so amazing, and Beth will stay here forever, and all of this. Anyway, but it turned out to be just another kind of pit with a tunnel, and it wasn't very exciting. But really, I'm going to segue on to what John said. I think what I could never find, but what I wish we had, is more poetry from non-centers. So more poetry from, say, the island of Lesbos, more of Sappho's poetry, more poetry from regional places like Tanagra, where there was a famous poetess. I wish we had more of that from the early periods of Greek history. I think that would tell us a great deal.
And I will just say that I don't have a favorite, because one of the great things about archaeology is you never know what you're going to find. You can use all the remote sensing to give you an idea of what might be down there. But if you find what you're expecting to find, none of it is interesting. It's the surprises that lead you in new directions. As John has said, as you dig down, you are forced to become an expert on whatever you find. And that's the great thing about scholarship, is that we're all interested in different things. And if you find something you've never seen before, invariably there are 2 or 3 articles on it, maybe some books, and you're introduced to a whole new community. So I guess I don't know. I don't want to name something because I want it to be a surprise.
Wonderful, wonderful. And let's shift back a little bit to the personal. How some of the lessons learned and advice maybe you would give to other couples that are in the field in terms of what's, how have you been able to balance this all? Obviously, not just your work, but family and husband and wife.
You guys take that one.
Another one.
First.
Ask a different one.
I have something I could say, that when we first started thinking about the idea of going to Thebes together and running an excavation together, we took aside 2 of our very good friends who run an excavation in Turkey. And they are married, and they were working together for a long time. Chris Roosevelt, who now leads the Koç University Center there in Istanbul, and his wife, Christina Luke. And we said, so tell us what it's like. What is it like working together? How do you do it? And they kind of looked at each other, and then Chris kind of wryly said, well, or was it Christina? I can't remember which one said it. Well, the things that you really love about each other, you will love even more. And the things that you really don't love about each other, you will not love even more. And that has proven to be quite true. They were prophetic. But, life is life, and you have to get along. And that's marriage is marriage, and you get along and you work at it. And it works out as long. We are very complementary. We have very different skill sets. And so some things that I'm really good at, Kevin is not, and it's vice versa. And so we take over when the other person needs it. And that's one of the ways we made it work.
And I'll just say, bringing kids to Greece is one of the best things that you can do for kids, because many of the listeners will know Greek society loves kids. And when you go to a taverna late at night, all the kids are up running around and everybody's looking after them. And it seems like carnival. And so our kids loved it. And we were in a small village, and folks knew who we were, and they helped us look out for our kids. So one of the great sort of losses in this time of COVID is the chance to travel. And we ourselves missed going to Greece this summer, but travel really helps kids, and it helps a family grow closer. And so John mentioned earlier, it's stressful, but there are great moments of joy in that as well. So bringing the kids to Greece on an excavation was tough, but would never do it differently now.
I agree with that. Having the children live there was fantastic because they got a different perspective. I remember when we brought our children back for the first time after we'd been there, AJ was asked by a little girl, well, we were in a car, and she said, I hate English, and AJ, it's really hard in school or something. And AJ turned to her and said, what was your first language? Because he assumed that she must be speaking, you're trying to speak a new language. And our daughter, Laura, we went on a cruise once, and we were going in the islands, and every day we would go in a different museum, and there would be the Neolithic and the Bronze Age and the Archaic and the classical room. And I don't remember what the sequence was, but Laura walked into the museum. We went to the Neolithic and then the Bronze Age. And then she said, oh, I've seen this one. Like it was the same museum she had seen every day in every island. So seeing it through their eyes was just so wonderful. And knowing that they had a real international perspective. And I think I would like to take all of my college kids and plop them down in Greece for a year, because then they would be so much more aware of what the world is like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll just tell you a good story about my son, Sean, who was in Greece as a 10-year-old. And when we returned after our 3 years in Greece, we went to a grocery store in America for the first time, and his eyes were as wide as saucers. He couldn't believe all the selection. He couldn't believe how wide the aisles were. And as we walked down the aisle of cleaning products, he stopped, he stared, and he shook his head. And I looked at him and I said, what's wrong? And he said, look at that box. And the box was of OxyClean, and OxyClean is spelled O-X-I. And he said, why would you sell something called OxyClean? So his mind had grown.
Yeah, a lot.
I had a chance, I've been following with especially Stephanie and Kevin when they were there. I was following on Stephanie's Facebook page, and I thought it was cute actually. And I don't know if people know, your children went to school there.
Yes.
In Greece. They came, I've talked a little bit about their ages when they came, and I seem to recall Sean wearing a fustanella and saying his pimata and the
Right.
thing. It's just amazing. Talk a little bit about that experience too, and John and Beth, if you have your experiences too.
We have some pictures if you want to share your screen.
I'll try and share the screen.
We have the video of our son. He was second grade through fourth grade there, and every year they had, of course, the March 25th celebrations. And every year, every child had to recite some poetry. He was just really good at talking in Greek. And my daughter actually, she topped out in some of the Greek classes, so she was allowed to go into the classes with the Greek students themselves who were because the classes were taught in English, they were losing their ability to read. And so they were having reading literature classes. And so she got to sit and read a novel with the other Greek-speaking kids. So her Greek got really good. In fact, when we moved back to the States, we used to walk around the grocery store together here in Pennsylvania and talk in Greek because no one could understand us because they'd never heard it before in central Pennsylvania, and that was really fun. And this summer, actually, she was lamenting because she was feeling like she was losing her Greek a little. And so she decided to read the first Harry Potter novel in Greek, and she just finished it in modern Greek.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. So they feel a little culturally different than their American friends. And I think that's so important for American kids.
Yeah.
What maybe has become even more relevant when you're looking at today's world versus the the world of the ancient Greeks?
I'm going to
John?
talk about that because it goes back to the question you asked as to what are the challenges. As far as I'm concerned, the challenges are the parents. Because when they bring their kids to college, what they want to know is what they call the outcome. What they mean is what job are they going to have at the end. I would like to talk to every admissions department in the country because we teach dozens of kids in the classics and we don't want to turn them all into majors. But what is worth keeping in mind is the biggest donor on our campus is a man called Macon Brock, who died 2 years ago, but about half the buildings on campus are named after him. He founded a thing called Dollar Tree and sold it for $800 million and gave a lot of that to the college. What was his major as an undergraduate at Randolph Macon with 1,100 students? It was Latin. Some of you may or may not have heard of the sports store Cabela's, which is the #2 sporting goods store in the country. And one of the trustees of Randolph Macon College was the person who ran it, turned it from a $500 million company to a $5 billion company. What was his major at Randolph Macon? It was ancient Greek. And finally, the one you'll all know is, what do you think Anthony Fauci's major was in college? Top man, we see him on TV every day as the top doctor in the country. He was a classics major, I think, at Boston College, isn't it, Greg? Or is it Greg?
Just outside of Boston.
Holy Cross.
Holy Cross.
Holy Cross,
The
yeah.
other one, the other one. But the point is, you learn Greek, you learn Latin, you learn to think, you learn to do anything you want to do, and that's what's important about studying antiquity. You cannot pick any single major that is going to prepare you for your career, because in 5 years, nobody cares what your major is. But these guys achieve and achieve and achieve because they've taken the right things in college. And that is the biggest challenge. And all we have to do is tell people and cite a few examples for why classical studies should and will continue to be significant.
Beautifully said.
Excellent, yeah.
I have one other question, and I can only imagine when you're talking about your career and the lifelong achievements and the places you traveled, there are many things that inspire you or that you're proud of. What contribution do you feel you're most proud of that you've been able to accomplish? John, you want to start? I'm curious.
Sure. Well, it's got to be the students. In the Agora, in 40 years of digging with students, we've trained 1,000 students, most of whom did not go into ancient studies, many of whom did. And the 200 students I had as Mellon professor, the graduate students, the real pros. And if they feel about me the way I feel about my mentors that I worked with at the American School 20 and 30 years down the line, I will be very, very satisfied with how I spent my time.
Beautiful. You want to take?
Sure. For myself, I would just say it's the students as well. But first of all, I didn't teach as many students as John, or haven't taught as many as John has taught. But the thing that teaching allows me to do, and the American School allowed me to do, was to bring students to places they hadn't been before. And I brought students with Beth to Ethiopia. I brought students to Jordan, and we were in Wadi Rum in Jordan, walking down a hill, and two of the students in front of me stopped and just turned around and said, I couldn't have imagined this in my life. I never even knew this place existed, and you took me here. And all of those students earned the right to be there, and all of those students will be successful. But I was able just to open a door, and the good news is they walked through. And so that's what I'm most proud of.
Stephanie, what about you?
Well, I was never Mellon professor, but I am a teacher, and I do think that what I find value in, what makes me feel like I've spent my time well, is showing the relevance of all of this. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges as a field, whether it's archaeology or classical studies or Greek or Latin, is to show the parents and the students today the relevance of why we study these things from antiquity. And so I've had great success with that, especially with first-year students. And if you can take a first-year student and show them that studying ancient texts or ancient cultures or ancient building practices is just as important as studying economics, then you've won a great deal. And they become broader people, just like my kids became broader people when they were in Greece. And so that's what I take joy in doing, I guess.
Sure. Beth?
Well, John and I wrote a popular book on the world of the ancient Greeks for Thames and Hudson that's been translated into 6 other languages, including Hungarian and Finnish and Spanish and Japanese. And then when I talk to people like, I don't know, my dentist, who says, oh, that sounds cool, I always wanted to go there. I feel like it's a way of channeling ancient Greece to a lot of people very broadly without having to be an expert at it, just introducing them to the culture of Greece and to the culture of ancient Greece. And that's the part that I'm proudest of, is just reaching out to people without any real expertise or not giving them a quiz or a test, but just allowing them to feel some of the excitement I have for it.
We know the challenges that this country, a lot of liberal arts schools have faced maintaining, never mind Latin and Greek language, but classics in general. I'm just curious from your vantage point, specifically to archaeology and so forth, how is there, how would you, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, is archaeology still a kind of vibrant field of study? Is it facing the same challenges as the ancient languages and classics, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 being, it's we're in a serious crisis, versus 10 where it's extremely healthy and vibrant and there's nothing to worry about? So maybe quickly go around the table, Kevin and Stephanie first.
Well, I would say in terms of interest in the classroom, we're a 10. If we can get them in the classroom, they love it. But I will return to John's point. We're more and more focused on the outcome and what job they will have at the end. And I just tell them, when I can get the chance, I've met a lot of successful people in my life. And when I see them in Greece, or when they talk to me about a book, they say, yeah, I've done a lot of things, but this is what I love. And I just want to tell people, start there. Start with what you love. Because as John said, if you do what you love, it'll all work out. And if you're a driven, successful person, you'll find a way. I worry about the state schools. I worry about the focus on jobs. I worry about the money. But if we can get them in the classroom, we'll be okay.
We have a school of 1,500 students with 68 classics majors right now and archaeology majors as well. And my archaeology majors are getting contract archaeology jobs before they graduate. So if we train them in the law and in our field archaeology right here, they've got jobs before they leave college. There are lots of archaeology jobs. Now, that might not be the same in Greece. It's a little bit harder for foreigners, for Americans to go and work in Greece, but certainly here, archaeology is a good job to get.
This one comes from our friend Jim Logothetis. What would you recommend to the Greek American community about promoting Greek American full-time elementary schools in America? There are only a dozen remaining and fast closing.
You know, Greek school's fun.
You want them out infecting other people. You don't want them all together.
Yeah.
Spread among all the schools, showing how solid Greek culture is, both present and past, and how the family culture works in a Greek society. And you want other people to know that. So we don't want to put them all together and waste that resource.
Pointed to our experience with teachers in the classroom. I taught at the middle school level and the high school level before I went on to teach at colleges. And take it from me, as somebody who taught at that level, teachers love to have folks to come in and talk about heritage and history in their own lands. And I know when I talk to a group of young students about archaeology, their eyes light up. And I would suggest that, you know, for all the focus on the end point, we should think about the start as well. We should get into the third grade class. We should show them slides. We should let them hear what Greek sounds like. And, you know, my parents are both from Ireland, and everybody knows what St. Patrick's Day is. Well, maybe everybody should know what Oshi Day is. And you should visit the classrooms.
There are ways you can get to the audience today or get to the community today. But what can we do, do you think, as a national, international organization to really help get that message out more so? And through our network and our resources that we have available to us.
One of the strongest things you guys have been doing, and if you get the other Greek American organizations to do it, it's got to pay off. And that is sending that third generation back to Greece so they understand why and how they're special and how their family structure supports them and what their past is like, so that they know it, because they can't know it just going to a regular old American school. Somebody has to teach it to them specially, and getting them to do the Greek in churches is difficult, but those kids who went on the national, whatever it is, Heritage Greece program,
right.
When you listen to them afterwards, they are all absolutely transformed by understanding where they come from. They're proud of it and they want to foster it. What always amazed me when I go to an NHS dinner, after the first day or so, Beth and I started not sitting in the tables up front. We started sitting with the kids at the back of the room. These little kids would be bouncing around, having a good time, flirting and doing all these things, cute and being made up to the nines. And you'd ask them, so what are you going to do? And they're all going to be neuroscientists. These little kids that are 17 years old have it planned out, and they know what they want and they know why they want it. As a community, it's phenomenally effective, and you don't want to lose the tie with Greece for these extraordinary people who are going to make the future in America, but they shouldn't leave Greece behind.
It's very powerful.
Yeah.
And you can even, you know, I would even add that you can even say, I mean, you're right. It's important to invest in the next gen. I would also add to that is I think it's equally important that even the generations that came over here originally from Greece, they left for different reasons, whether it was back in the 1900s, my grandparents, or those that kind of left them the second wave of the 1970s because of the coup in Greece and the civil wars, that that there's even a generation of folks here that that can, not just students that can learn a lot by going back to Greece and spending time there and exploring the culture as it is today.
Yeah, I think that's where the synergy of the National Hellenic Society and then what the American School does. The Heritage Greece program reconnects people, young people, hopefully for a lifetime.
Any final comments before we close?
Well, I think for me, what would my life have been like if I hadn't gone to Greece? What would it have been like if I hadn't gotten involved with it? My family's from West Virginia. We've been here forever. There was nothing but America. The whole transformation of what I turned out to be and the things that I now value about life, such as just keeping the antiques and keeping the things that are around, that are valuable to me now that maybe wouldn't have been. I don't know if that would be the same for Greek Americans as it is for me, not being Greek, if you see what I mean. But I'm sure if you can find as much meaning in holding something in your hand that hasn't been held by anyone for 3,600 years, that is so amazing. And that's really what life has become. I feel connected. I once had to speak and I said, what connects us is education, which reaches back to Homer and forward to our grandchildren. And so if you think of it that way, I just feel so connected to the Greek world. And that's been transformational for me.
It's impressive, Beth. The life, I agree with you, the life that is lived between these places is so important, not just for the chronology of everything, but also, I think for me anyway, Greece has given me a new way of being. I grew up in South Dakota. I was raised as a Lutheran. I mean, there was a very closed kind of society. And then I went to Greece and everything was the opposite that I had ever been brought up with. And so I became more open-minded and expanded my ways of living. And I come back to America now, and I'm having spent all this time in Greece, and I feel kind of half and half. And I think I've gained these positive aspects of my life from Greece. And so I'm kind of grateful for that, in addition to my career and all the things that I find interesting about antiquity. And I try to encourage my students, in fact, and my children to adopt these ways of being free. I guess that's the way I kind of think about it. But for me, it's been also a life-changing kind of thing on a character level.
Kevin?
Well, for me, going to Greece in some ways felt like a return home, because I grew up in San Diego. When I landed in Athens, I thought, well, I know this weather, I know these trees, I know these bushes. This feels like home to me. But it was also true in another way, in that, as I said, I'm first generation American. And in a way, it was a return to the old country. As we know, the Greeks here in America have been tremendously successful, and they left part of their culture behind, but they took it with them. And once I got more involved with Greece and I became more involved with Greek Americans, I just thought to myself, this feels like home to me. This is what my home feels like, a little bit of Ireland in this Greek home. It's a little bit of Greece. And that's a warm feeling. It's a great feeling. And, I'm lucky to share in it. And so I guess with Beth and with Stephanie, I just feel blessed that I got to go to Greece and I got to meet some of the people that are speaking tonight.
And lastly, John?
Yeah, I have to agree with all that. I guess I would say, with all the students we have and with the colleagues we work with, the people you've heard this evening, and the people we have at the American School, they all know at the start that they're not going to become rich and they're not going to become famous, but they're going to get to work on something that is something they're going to love. Mm-hmm. And throughout our careers, the one thing we always have, and what makes it nice to work with these people, nobody is here for some other motive. They are studying antiquity because they want to. And that's what makes them such good colleagues. Everybody is working in the same direction without any ulterior motives whatsoever. They are working through love of antiquity. And in a way, when I'm here, I feel sorry for everybody who doesn't get to share in that. It's all these Americans doing all these busy things. They're very, very important. And they're not thinking at all about what happened when Justinian did this or when the Mycenaeans did that. And their lives simply are not as rich as ours are. When we wake up, as often happens, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and we're lying there in bed in the dark, we'll either talk about the kids or we'll talk about unbelievably trivial things about antiquity. And what we learned about the new DNA that tells us that the plague really came from here, it didn't go there. And things you can't even believe are worth thinking about. And it just absolutely makes our day. And we are so lucky to be students of antiquity and to be bringing the next generation along. And the more the Greek community can be part of that, the better for everybody.
That's extremely well said, John. I don't think any of us could have said it any better than you have. And we'll once we get off this call, I'll have Art get in touch with you so we can write down that quote and send it to all our membership. If you all of you have maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, we just had a couple maybe the last 2 questions. One is, where do you see archaeology going in the next? Forget about COVID, obviously, in the short term, it's a major challenge for everybody. But where do you see archaeology going in the next decade and beyond?
I'm going to say something I shouldn't say because it's rude, but I'm going to say it. I spent my entire life dealing with the past, and I don't care about the future.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna be able to top that one.
This has been a great opportunity today. It's been a great evening, and I just want to say, if I may,
Sure.
on behalf of the American School, and just thank you to the National Hellenic Society for giving us the opportunity and giving these incredible people an opportunity to share. But for myself as a Greek American, and in this forum, to thank them and those who stand next to them, behind them, generations prior and generations yet to come, of these amazing individuals who, truth be told, probably know more about our heritage and our culture and Greece than any of us do. It's these men and women who are so passionate that they don't run to the beaches and things like that. They're running to the libraries. They're running back and forth to archaeological digs in the middle of nowhere sometimes, and it's truly a testament to their passion and their love, their unconditional love for Greece. So allow me just to say thank you, and honored to have a relationship with all of you, and for what you do. And please accept that thank you and gratitude on behalf of every Greek American, past, present, and future.
I would concur that as well. George, you said it very well. We can't thank you folks enough. And the work you've done, the impact you've made, not only to the country of Greece, but also to the Greek community, the diaspora, and the world itself. You can't put a price tag on that, and certainly we're the beneficiaries of that. And it's a pleasure to have the 4 of you joining us today, and really digging into your personal lives and what made you get to this point and why you're so interested and so passionate about it. And I think our viewers definitely felt that as George and I did. So again, thank you very much. Again, on the behalf of George and the American School of Classical Studies in Athens and the National Hellenic Museum's Oral History Project, the National Hellenic Society will always have a place for you and the work that you've done, and able to help guide us, and not only in terms of preserving the past, but perpetuating it to the future. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. God bless everyone. Stay healthy, and we look forward to catching up soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Drake. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Drake.